May 2021. In a quiet Athens suburb, 20-year-old Caroline Crouch was found dead beside her baby daughter. Her husband, Babis Anagnostopoulos, a respected helicopter pilot, told police a chilling story. Masked burglars had broken into their home, tied him up, and murdered his wife. But almost immediately, cracks began to appear. Why would robbers suffocate a young mother in front of her infant? Why leave her husband alive? And why escape with so little when the house held far more? To the public, Babis was a grieving widower, clutching his child at the funeral, begging for justice on national TV. Behind the scenes, investigators were uncovering a truth far darker than anyone imagined. When it finally came out, it stunned Greece and the entire world. This is the case of Caroline Crouch and Babis Anagnostopoulos. Caroline Crouch was just 20 years old, a young mother living in the suburbs of Athens with her husband, Babis Anagnostopoulos. On the surface, their lives seemed idyllic. Caroline, born in the UK but raised partly in Greece, had grown into a striking, adventurous young woman. Babis, nearly a decade older, was a respected helicopter pilot with a polished reputation. Together, they looked like a couple who had it all: a beautiful home in Glyconera, a healthy baby girl, and the kind of lifestyle many admired. Social media painted the picture of happiness: smiling photos, family outings, glimpses of a life filled with comfort and love. But in May 2021, that image shattered. Police were called to the couple's home, where they discovered Caroline dead beside her infant daughter. Babis, shaken and distraught, claimed they had been the victims of a violent burglary. He told investigators that masked intruders had broken in, tied him up, and suffocated Caroline while she tried to protect them. The story sent shockwaves through Greece. Newspapers splashed headlines of ruthless criminals terrorizing a young family in their own home. The nation grieved with Babis, who appeared devastated, giving statements and standing as a symbol of a husband desperate for justice. But as the days turned into weeks, details began to blur. Investigators quietly noticed inconsistencies. Something about the burglary scene didn't add up. Beneath the polished surface of the perfect couple, questions began to form. Caroline and Babis weren't just another young family starting out. Their story was about to become one of the most infamous and haunting cases in modern Greek history. Caroline Crouch was barely out of her teenage years when she met Babis Anagnostopoulos. At 16, she was already adventurous, headstrong, and restless, with dreams of studying psychology and building a life that felt her own. Friends remembered her as outspoken, unafraid to challenge authority, someone who carried both confidence and vulnerability. Babis was different. At 29, he was nearly a decade older, with the charm and stability of a man already settled in his career. As a helicopter pilot, he exuded confidence, discipline, and control. To a young girl searching for direction, Babis seemed like a safe harbor, experienced, protective, and worldly. The attraction was immediate, and soon the relationship became serious. But the speed of their romance raised eyebrows. Caroline was still a teenager when she moved in with him. By 18, she was married, and within a year, she gave birth to their daughter, Lydia. On the surface, it looked like a whirlwind love story: young wife, older husband, a new baby, and a home in a quiet Athens suburb. Yet the age gap and the quick progression created an imbalance that would become dangerous. Caroline's diary would later reveal her truth. In her private notes, she poured out her frustration with Babis's controlling behavior. She wrote of heated arguments, of moments when she wanted to walk away, of plans to take Lydia and leave. Her words painted a picture of a young woman trapped, devoted to her child, but conflicted about her marriage. Friends noticed the tension too. Caroline had moments of happiness, but there were also flashes of anger and despair. She confided to some that Babis's need for control was suffocating. He decided where they went, what they did, and increasingly, how their lives would be lived. Behind the smiling photos on social media, the reality was far more fragile. As time went on, the cracks deepened. Caroline was only 20, still discovering who she was, but already tied to a man who expected obedience. She longed for independence, for freedom, but felt trapped in the role of wife and mother. Her diary entries revealed thoughts of escape, but also the fear of what might happen if she acted on them. For Babis, control seemed second nature. His polished image as a professional and provider masked an undercurrent of possessiveness. To the outside world, he was the perfect husband, calm, supportive, respectable. But inside their home, Caroline's growing defiance clashed with his dominance. Their love, once passionate, had become a cycle of arguments, silences, and reconciliations. By the spring of 2021, Caroline was desperate for change. She was searching for a way out, even considering leaving the marriage for good. Babis, however, wasn't willing to let go. It was this storm of youth, control, and conflict that set the stage for what would follow. A young woman trapped between love and fear, and a man who would rather destroy everything than lose control. May 11th, 2021. Inside the quiet suburb of Glyconera, Athens, the night began like any other for Caroline and Babis. Their 11-month-old daughter Lydia was asleep in her crib. Outside, the neighborhood was still, the kind of silence that blankets a city after midnight. But in the early hours of the morning, that silence was shattered. According to Babis's first account, armed burglars stormed their home. He claimed they broke a window, tied him up, and demanded cash. He said Caroline fought back to protect their baby, only to be suffocated by the intruders. When police arrived, the scene was chilling. Caroline was found lifeless, face down on the bed, with little Lydia crying beside her. Babis sat tied to a chair, ropes around his wrists, his face pale and shaken. The story he told officers was horrifying. A violent home invasion, a young mother murdered, a baby left clinging to her body. The brutality of it stunned Greece. News spread fast. Ruthless criminals had invaded a family home and killed a 20-year-old mother in cold blood. The crime seemed senseless, random, the kind of violence that sparks national outrage. Babis was seen as a survivor, a grieving husband who had watched helplessly as his wife was murdered. But even as police began their investigation, quiet doubts formed. Something about the scene didn't sit right. The ropes around Babis looked loosely tied, almost staged. The supposed point of entry showed no clear signs of a forced break-in. The burglars, according to a story, had stolen a small amount of money and jewelry. Odd, considering the violence of the crime. Still, the country rallied behind Babis. He was interviewed by reporters, his voice breaking as he spoke about losing the love of his life. He appeared at Caroline's funeral, cradling Lydia in his arms, a picture of grief that moved thousands. Cameras captured his tears, his anger, his demand for justice. For weeks, police pursued the burglary angle. Teams investigated possible suspects, searched for leads, and tried to piece together how the crime had unfolded. The public followed every update, certain that a dangerous gang was on the loose. But beneath the stage scene, silent clues were waiting. And soon, they would turn suspicion toward the man who seemed most broken. In the days following Caroline's death, Greek authorities worked tirelessly to track down the so-called burglars. Dozens of officers were assigned. Surveillance footage from the neighborhood was collected, and known criminal groups were questioned. The media repeated Babis's account. Masked intruders, a violent struggle, a young mother killed protecting her child. But investigators were uneasy. Nothing quite fit. For one, the level of violence seemed unnecessary for a robbery. Why suffocate a 20-year-old woman in front of her baby? Why leave the husband alive? And why take so little when there were far more valuables in the home? If you're still watching, please hit the like button. It won't cost you anything, but helps us a lot. And if you want to see more crime stories like this, make sure you subscribe to our channel. Then came the breakthrough. Caroline's smartwatch told a story no one could dispute. Data showed her heart rate spiking around 4 a.m., then flatlining shortly after. Babis's smartwatch, supposedly useless since he was tied up, told a different tale. It tracked steps and movement at the exact times he claimed to be immobilized. Even the baby monitor and security cameras revealed inconsistencies. Parts of the footage were missing, and investigators suspected deliberate tampering. With each discovery, the burglary theory collapsed. Slowly, suspicion turned toward Babis himself. Still, authorities needed more. They continued to press quietly, not revealing how much they knew. Then, on June 17, 2021, over a month after Caroline's death, police made their move. Babis had attended a memorial service for Caroline on the island of Anagnostopoulos, where she had grown up. Surrounded by mourners, he played the role of the grieving widower, holding their daughter and comforting Caroline's mother. But mid-ceremony, plainclothes officers approached. They told Babis they needed him to return to Athens to help identify a suspect. He agreed, unsuspecting. Back in Athens, inside the homicide division, the truth came out. After hours of questioning, Babis finally broke. He confessed that there had been no burglars, no masked intruders, no violent robbery. Instead, he admitted that in the early hours of May 11th, after yet another heated argument, he pinned Caroline down and smothered her until she stopped breathing. Their infant daughter was only inches away in her crib. When it was done, Babis staged the scene, tying himself up, breaking windows, scattering items, to make it look like a break-in. The confession was devastating. For over a month, he had lied to Caroline's family, to the police, and to the entire country. He had stood at her funeral in tears, carrying their child, while knowing he was the killer. When news of his arrest broke, the nation was stunned. The man they had seen as a grieving husband was unmasked as a manipulative liar. The betrayal cut deeper than the crime itself. A husband murdering his wife, then exploiting her death to protect himself. The investigation had revealed not just a murder, but a performance, one designed to deceive everyone. And for Caroline's family, the nightmare had only just begun. The confession shocked Greece to its core. When the truth came out, the betrayal was almost as shocking as the crime itself. The image of a widower mourning his young wife collapsed overnight, replaced by that of a manipulative murderer who had staged an elaborate cover-up. The trial began in 2022, and from the start, it was clear the prosecution intended to expose not only the crime, but the months of lies that followed. Caroline's private diary became one of the most damning pieces of evidence. In its pages, jurors read Caroline's raw words, her anger, her frustration, her longing to escape Babis's control. She wrote about his temper, his dominance, and her desire to take Lydia and leave him. The diary destroyed the defense's attempts to portray the marriage as harmonious. Prosecutors argued that Babis was not a man who snapped in the heat of the moment, as his lawyers tried to claim. He was cold, calculated, and controlling. The staged burglary, the self-inflicted restraints, the destroyed cameras, these were not acts of panic. They were the steps of a man who thought he could outsmart the world. And for a time, he did. His lies had manipulated the police, the press, and even international agencies like the FBI, who had believed they were dealing with a violent gang targeting Greek families. The fact that Babis deceived so many while attending memorials and giving interviews painted him as not just a killer, but a master manipulator. The prosecution's narrative was clear. This was not a crime of passion. This was control, domination, and finally, murder. After weeks of testimony, the court delivered its verdict. Babis Anagnostopoulos was found guilty of murdering Caroline Crouch and staging the crime scene. He was sentenced to life in prison, with an additional sentence for animal cruelty after killing the family dog to support his fake burglary story. For Caroline's family, the sentence was justice, but it was also unbearable. Her mother wept as she heard the words. Her daughter gone forever, her granddaughter now without parents. The family's only comfort was that the truth had finally been exposed. Babis's mask had finally been torn away. The world saw not a widower, but a manipulator who sacrificed his wife, his child's future, and his freedom, all to maintain control. The murder of Caroline Crouch was more than a crime. It was a betrayal. Behind the polished image of a perfect marriage lay control, manipulation, and violence. Babis fooled a nation, even the world, but he could not hide from the truth forever. Caroline's diary gave her a voice, even after death, and it spoke of a young woman desperate for freedom. Her story became a warning that appearances can deceive, and danger can live closest to home. In the end, Caroline's light was stolen, but her truth could not be silenced. If this case moved you, please take a moment to hit the like button. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss the next true crime story we uncover. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.